Hello and welcome to Ray of Light, a new podcast all about writing, reading and happiness with myself, Eleanor Ray. I write uplifting book club fiction, and I'd love my readers to feel better for having read one of my books. I want this podcast to have the same effect. This episode, I'm delighted to welcome TE Kinsey, the multi-million selling author of historical cozy crimes. He has published 13 Lady Hardcastle mysteries, 2 Dizzy Heights mysteries, and has won over readers across the world with his whimsical charms. Tim, thank you so much for coming on to speak with me today.
I was just mouthing the word whimsy.
Whimsy is a very good word for you, I think.
I love
whimsy.
whimsy.
Can you tell us? I love it too. Can you tell us a little bit more about Lady Hardcastle and how she goes about solving crimes?
Lady Hardcastle, when we first meet her in the first book, which is set in 1908, she is 40 years old and she's a widow and she is incredibly wealthy. We never find out just how wealthy she is, but she's wealthy enough that she doesn't have to worry about money. What we find out as the series goes on, actually we probably find out during the first book, but she used to be a spy for the British government. And together with her redoubtable lady's maid, Florence Armstrong, they averted all sorts of international crises, Europe, and originally in China and then through India and then back home in Europe. But by 1908, they've decided that they're going to retire for a quiet life in the country, hence the title of the first book. But obviously, because it's a murder mystery, they get tied up in solving a murder, which they do because initially the police inspector they meet seems to be cutting corners. He's not, as it turns out, but he seems to be. So they decide to investigate on their own, off their own bat. And it carries on from there. The series carries on from there with these 2 women who are unlikely best friends because they're from different social classes. One is an employer and one is her servant. But they are best friends, and that causes some social confusion, but also gives them brilliant ability to get into places where either one of them couldn't get in, perhaps on her own. So Flo can go down and talk to the servants. Emily can talk to the upper class people upstairs, and it all works out. But they solve crimes by, do you know what? I mean, let's be honest about it, more by luck than by good skill and judgment. I mean, they figure stuff out, but there's an awful lot of coincidences and helpful happenstance that leads them in the right direction. But eventually they solve the crime, and Flo she's a martial arts expert, which is one of the reasons I changed their backstory at some point so that they could travel through China. And Flo could learn martial arts. And so there's all sorts of fisticuffs. She's also, which she wasn't originally, but she is also the daughter of a circus knife thrower. So she has extraordinary knife skills as well. But yes,
Interesting.
Yeah, there is a tale attached to how that came to be, but maybe we can touch on that later if when we get to some other stuff. But yeah, that's who they are. They were originally created for something else entirely, but I added the whimsy, and there they are, solving crimes and having great fun.
I love it. And I love with cozy crimes, when you have people solving mysteries who aren't the police, it's always good to have a reason why they have these special skills and why they're so good at solving what they do. And I think you've crafted their backstory really cleverly there to make it actually all make perfect sense. And your readers think so too, because how many books have you sold now, Tim?
I think it's about 2.25 million.
Wow. Now, and I know you started off, you've alluded to them having a slightly different past, but you started off self-publishing. And I find your journey really inspirational for anyone who's thinking of self-publishing or has already done so, because you did it, I think, to get 20 readers, and now you've ended up with 2.25 million. Can you tell us a little bit more about that writing journey and how you came to this incredibly successful place that you've now arrived?
I think it's all down to luck. Genuinely, I think it's all down to luck, because I'm not a better writer than all of the other people who are out there writing. I haven't got better ideas than all of the other people who are out there writing. All that happened was that I had written the thing that people wanted on the day that they decided to buy a book. That first one it kind of dribbled along, much like self-published books do, a few a day, and it hit 20 copies within about 11 days, I think. And the second book was finished the middle of the following year, 2015. And what happened, I don't know if it still happens, but in those days, when you self-publish something on Kindle Direct, which is what the platform I was using, when you released a new book, it would go into the new releases bucket and they would promote it as a new release. And because there was a first book, people would look at the second book and go, what, who's this? What's going on here? And they'd look at the first book and it had some good reviews. And they started buying both books. And there was a period in the middle of 2015 where I was earning more each month from the self-published books than I was earning from my monthly salary. And I suddenly thought, well, this could be a thing. I could, but I hadn't done. This is the problem, you see. I can't be anyone's mentor or a guide to future success because I didn't do anything. I just wrote 2 books and put them out.
You didn't do any marketing.
Nope.
The power of the books.
The power of the books. I did a couple of giveaways, which was how I got the first review. I gave away something like 150 copies and I got a review out of that, which fortunately was a 5-star. And they started to come in after that. Once there was one review from a stranger, I allowed my friends to review it. I never solicit reviews. You know, you review it or you don't. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't mind. But the rule back then was that friends weren't allowed to review the book until it had an organic review from a stranger, because I didn't want it to look like my friends were just reviewing my books. I didn't want that. So anyway, so I had these reviews, and that they kind of fueled the whole thing. And once it's this awful thing. Once a book is in the charts, people notice it and it stays in the charts and people buy it.
You get into a flywheel of success because if you read this, you might also like this. So once you're selling, but it's easy to carry on selling in a way. But if you never get to that first rung, that's when it's difficult. And I understand you self-published originally and then Amazon saw how well you were doing and approached you. Is that correct?
Yes. November 2015. I was sitting at work and I got this, I just picked up my phone because I don't know, I must have been bored maybe. And I picked up my phone and saw that there was an email and it was from someone who said they were an editor at Amazon Publishing and they were reading my books and really enjoying them. And could we talk? And I thought, this is either a scam or it's one of my mates messing about. But I worked for IMDb and IMDb is owned by Amazon. So I was able to look up this person who was Jane Snellgrove. I was able to look her up in the internal phone book and she's a real person. So I replied and we talked. And the idea was that, we might buy your books, but we don't want to get your hopes up. She liked the first 2, which were collections of 4 short stories each. And she said, have you thought of writing a 3rd one? And I said, well, I'm writing it now. She said, can I see it? Can I see it now? And with a synopsis. And I thought, well, no, not really, because I haven't got a synopsis. It's all in my head. So I was late for work the following day because I wrote a synopsis and posted it off to her, emailed it off to her. And a week later, she came back to me with an offer and said, we will buy the first 2 if you rewrite them both into novel form.
Okay.
And we'll buy the 3rd one if just finish it. It's brilliant, just finish it. And she said, can you do that? And I said, yeah, of course I can. Don't be daft. I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do this because these were 4 stories each in these 2 books that were completely unrelated apart from the fact they had the same detectives and they were set in the same village. I had no idea how to do that. So I was paired up with this freelance development editor and we took 2 of the stories from the first book and we meshed them together. We took one as the spine of the story and we dropped another one in as a country house murder. We dropped it in as a set piece in the middle. And that kind of worked. So they were released at the end of 2016 and they went off to a really slow start. And then something happened. And to this day, they haven't ever told me what. But they did something. They pulled some lever, sent out some marketing email, or did something. And in January 2017, they just went bonkers. And I've not looked back.
I think you've written some wonderful books that really connect with people. And I think it's the relationships in those books and the way the characters leap off the page that's really made people love them and want to buy them. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the process of writing. George Orwell said writing a novel was like a horrible, exhausting struggle, like a long bout with some painful illness. Now, I have to say, I sometimes felt like that in the past. And then I had a long, painful illness last year. And going through that process, going through chemotherapy, reminded me that actually writing makes me feel better. And I write books because I love it. And yes, you get a high when you finish a novel, which is amazing. But that's a moment. And then you start worrying about edits and feedbacks and reviews and sales and things. What you want to do is enjoy the whole process of writing from start to finish as much as you can. And that's part of my motivation for starting this podcast. It's making sure that people enjoy the creative process rather than just enjoying the end result. And you are someone who loves every element of it. Is it something that brings you complete joy? Can you tell me about it?
Absolutely. Every part of it, from coming up with the ideas, from planning the story to writing the story. I complain, as every author does, about structural edits, development edit, but only because it's hard, not because it's unpleasant, but it's a complex process that can be very tricky to do. But I still enjoy doing it. I've been writing since I was 11, and it's what I did for fun. Where back in the days when I had a day job, and my wife and I would obviously we would do holidays and stuff together, but we worked different places, so we had different annual leave allowances. And if I had any more left over towards the end of the accounting year, I would just take some time off and sit at home and write something.
I feel I have a similar experience because I started writing novels while I was working full time. And I'd get home from work and I'd put a little hour in my Outlook calendar. I'd come home and I'd write for an hour. It wasn't because I wanted to get published. I didn't think it would ever be possible, but I did it because I loved it. And I think when you're doing it professionally, it's important to try and reconnect to that. You're doing this because you love it. And now I feel so lucky that I get to do what I love all day, every day, until I have to pick the kids up from school.
Absolutely that. When I decided that I was going to self-publish the first book, I had as little free time as anybody has. But when you analyze what you do with your day, you find that obviously there's never a point where you're not doing anything, but there's some stuff that you can jettison if you wanted to do something else. So I worked out that the way that the routine worked out in the morning, it was just youngest son was still at home, and I would drop him off at school on my way to work. So I couldn't leave for work until he was ready to go to school, which gave me about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour between me being up and dressed and eating my breakfast to leaving the house. So I said, I'll write for 3/4 of an hour. And there was half an hour in the evening when I had exactly that same thing. And it didn't get in the way of anything else. I was able to just fit it in. But yeah, I genuinely, I mean, I'm in the lucky position now that if I stopped writing, it wouldn't be a bad thing financially. But
bad thing for your readers.
I like to think so. I like to imagine so. But if I stop liking doing it, I'm going to stop doing it. I only do it because it's fun, and I've only ever done it because it's fun. It really frustrates me when I see social media full of writers saying how awful it is to be a writer. I mean, I get that you have a bad day, and we all have bad days, but on those bad days, I don't post on social media about it. I just stop doing it. I go and do something else, and I come back to it when I feel like it. I do get that. There is that thing that, oh, this is hard. Oh, and it's such a struggle. And that whole George Orwell thing that, oh, it's just so awful. Well, then don't do it. Do something else. Do something you like.
I think George Orwell could learn something from the Ray of Light podcast, perhaps.
I hope so.
But yeah, I think it's very important. Someone once told me you vote with your time. And that's what I started saying, you know what I'd like to do is I'd like to write a book. And I put aside that chunk of time. It wasn't a long time, but it was some time that I had that I would have been watching telly or doing something that didn't matter. And I know you say you're not full of tips for aspiring authors, but I think what we're discussing here is very important. It's like, just take that little bit of time. It doesn't have to be when you feel super inspired and you're at your creative peak. Just some time to sit and write. And little by little, you'll build something up that maybe one day could sell 2.25 million copies.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the habit. You know, it's like practicing a musical instrument or going to the gym. If it's a habit that you do and you will do it every day, then it's not a chore. It's that thing that you do, even if you're not at your sparkly inspired best. If you've written a couple of hundred words today, you've written a couple of hundred words today, and you're 200 words closer to your 80,000 word book. And
exactly.
it might take you a year to do that, but what else are you going to do with that half an hour? You're not stealing that half an hour. You know, I didn't steal that half an hour from my family. I didn't steal it from important work. I didn't steal it from other stuff that I absolutely had to do.
Yes, and I think it's not stealing, it's giving yourself a gift.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I think the legal profession might. Yeah, I didn't steal that car, Your Honour. I gave myself the gift of a car.
Yes, exactly. So talking of chores, how do you feel about research? You write historical crime and you write it very well. It feels very authentic. How do you go about your research? Is it a part of the process that you enjoy? Is it something that feels a chore?
I absolutely love it. My degree, although it was thousands of years ago now, was history. And so I still love to read historical texts and textbooks and original sources. I love old newspapers and stuff. So I don't have any problem doing the research. The advantage I have now, 12 books into the series, is that the bulk of the major background research is already done. I know enough about Edwardian life that I can get the facts in, and what I don't know and what I do or what I make up is at least authentic. I've created, it's very obvious that if you're doing what I do, which is whimsy and fun times, that I'm not telling history. I'm not telling you the history of Edwardian life. I have very obviously created my own version of Edwardian life. But I do that based on facts. And if you can back it up with facts, you know, if someone says, oh, yes, well, that didn't happen. And you say, well, actually, yes, the general election in 1910 did last 4 weeks. It wasn't one day like we have now. It was a 4-week event. And they go, oh, was it really? Or what's the one? It's the one I always quote this one because it really bugged me at the time. I got marked down in a review back when I read reviews. I got marked down in a review because my characters wore wristwatches in 1909, and they said, oh, everybody knows that people didn't wear wristwatches until the First World War, when army officers began strapping their pocket watches to their wrists. And I thought, oh my God, how did I get that so wrong? And I Googled it, and it turns out that Patek Philippe made a wristwatch for a Russian countess in 1860 something. And that
must have been very satisfying.
It was brilliant. The beginnings of each story come from an aspect of Edwardian life.
Do you do your research at the beginning of a book? Because I do it partway through. I come up with the idea and then I think, oh no, I don't know very much about this. So for See the Stars, for example, it was about an astrophysicist and stargazing. And I'm not an astrophysicist at all, but I didn't want the research. The research bogs me down too early on. I want to write the gist of the story. And then when I'm maybe a third, 2/3 through, I go in and I fill in the gaps and I do my research. And luckily my son, he's only 7, but he's very into space and the stars. Right. So we went and visited planetariums together. We went to Greenwich Observatory. I discovered that my husband has a friend who's an astrophysicist for the European Space Agency. So I got her to read the book and give me all these amazing facts I never would have known. But I can't do it at the beginning because I don't know enough about what I need to know. I like to do it partway through and then fix everything. But you sound like you do it the other way. You start from the research and that will make the story flow.
It's the research that tells me what the story can be. So, you know, it's researching Edwardian film industry. So a friend of mine did his PhD on Edwardian film. And so I just took him to lunch one day and just plied him with really gormless questions about it. But it was that research, that's that conversation, which is research. I mean, it cost me the price of a burger, but it was that research that shaped the story, that told me what the story could be. I had a vague idea of what it would be like, but it was the research that shaped it. Similarly with the theatre or with, as I say, with the aviation thing, it's the research that tells me all the things that could happen and all the people who were involved and all of the, you know, all of the events and the inventions and stuff that would shape what we were doing. And so, yes, I do it round the other way.
Okay, brilliant.
I do come up with, because I have to come up with the idea that I want to talk about movies.
Yes, yes. You come up with the idea, yes. That will lead you down a particular route.
Exactly. Before I know that, I have to contact Swedish Pete and ask him if he'll tell me the secrets of his research for the price of a burger.
Brilliant. And with your research, you told me a little bit about how you get your ideas from the research. Your books that you've written, do you have a favorite? Which one do you love the most?
I think the one I actually do like most, which is called An Assassination on the Agenda, which I like. It's the one I enjoyed writing the most. I think that's what it was. So I'd said that these two were spies. And as the series progresses, they get sucked back into being spies again. Because by 1909, the Secret Service Bureau had been established. And it was just two blokes. It was Smith Cummings and Kell, I think his name was, who eventually became MI5 for home stuff and MI6 for foreign stuff by the time we get to the Second World War. Anyway, the SSB is founded in 1909. So I've got Lady Hardcastle's brother, Harry, involved in the foundations of the SSB, which is completely untrue because it was just these two guys. But I've got him involved in it, and he brings his sister back into the fold. So they're starting to work as spies again. And they go off and they do spy stuff, but we never know what it is. They just come back. You know, in the next book, they'll have come back from some spy thing they've done. But because the readers knew that they'd been spies, and I vaguely told the story of how Lady Hardcastle's husband was murdered and they escaped in China and made their way overland across China into Burma and then down to India. The readers want these prequel stories, and they want that story, and they want the stories of how they were spies in Europe. So there's all of these stories that are untold. And they keep going, oh, you should do the prequels, you should do the prequels. And my editor once said, you should do the prequels. And I said, yeah, but think of the research. I mean, I don't mind research, but that's just nightmarish. And also, there's a lot of fuss made in the very first book about the fact that it's their first murder investigation. So if we do prequels, they can't solve.
Oh, of course.
They can't solve murders. Otherwise, have to retcon the whole series to make that work.
Yes.
So I said, people aren't going to like it. So I said, why don't we test the waters with a book that is an espionage story and see if people go for it? And I just loved doing that. I set it in London, which I had never done before. I usually set them either in the fictitious village where they live, or they've been to Bristol, they've been to Weston-super-Mare, and they've been to a made-up place in Rutland. But they'd never been to London. And so I was able to do all this stuff they're around Docklands, and they're around the Bermondsey, Southwark area on the south of the river, again, around the docks and stuff around there. And I got maps and I got all this research.
And I bet it was a really colourful time in London back then.
Oh my God, it was brilliant. I loved writing. And there's probably far too much historical stuff in it, far too much detail about the exact route that you would take, because I was just so into it. So that's my favourite. That's the one that I like the most because I enjoyed writing it so much. I think that's the one.
Wonderful. That's brilliant to hear. So talking about favourites, can you tell me about a book you've read, not one of your own, that you absolutely love? And what I wanted from this is one that maybe our listeners might not be familiar with. So something that's not necessarily a bestseller yet, but you think is a hidden gem, something that's brought you some joy, some happiness, or you think is just a real treat to read that you would suggest.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am asked very often to read a book, to comment on it, to blurb it so they can have a comment for the cover. And I've done it for a few people. And, they've been some brilliant books. Anthony Johnston's Dog Sitter Detective book I loved. And there's a few others that I've loved. But sometimes you read them and you think, I'm not sure that this is for me. But I got this one by Sally Smith, and it's called A Case of Mice and Murder. And it's set around the same sort of time as my own books, but it's set in London in the Temple where the barristers live. It stars a barrister, and he has to solve a murder, a weird case of finding out who the author of a book is about the church mice from the Temple Church. And there's something about Sally Smith she's a former KC. I think she's retired now as a KC, but she's a barrister and she'd worked in the Temple, and her voice was just perfect. It was one of the best if not the best cozy crime I had read up to that point. It was just brilliant. And I wish more people were aware of it. I wish more people could read it and enjoy it. It's, again, because it's my period, I'm appalled by how much more authentic it is, period-wise, than mine, because I have to add whimsy. But no, it is brilliant. A Case of Mice and Murder.
A Case of Mice and Murder. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Tim. Now, moving away from writing for a moment, where else do you find happiness in life? I think some of our listeners will be writers, some aspiring writers, some will be readers. What would you suggest as a means to happiness, something to bring you joy?
So over in the corner of my office there are a bunch of guitars and a drum kit. And you don't have to have a bunch of guitars and a drum kit to get the fun out of it. But I've been making music for about the same amount of time as I've been writing, with the same amount of training and skill. But yes, now if I'm fed up of, if I'm stuck on a scene, I can either go out for a walk, which is probably healthier and more productive. But if not, I will go and sit at the drum kit or pick up one of the guitars and just noodle around for half an hour. And that does bring me joy. I've been playing drums in a band for, I don't know, since 2007. It's 18 years. One of the most joyous things for me is making music with other people.
I think it's interesting that you've chosen something else creative, but something physically very different. Because one thing I never liked when I first started writing, as I said, I'd work during the day and then I'd come home and open up my laptop and carry on writing. And it was physically so similar to what I'd been doing during the day. So I used to trick myself to make it seem a little bit different. So I'd lie on the sofa with my laptop on my lap instead of sitting at a desk. And that's still how I write to this day if I'm sitting upright. I can't, it's too much like being in the office. I don't enjoy it. But things like playing an instrument or painting or walking or cooking even, it's just physically a little bit different to that kind of sitting down and writing. And so one thing, I wrote my first couple of books while I was working, and then I wrote a book while I was on maternity leave. And I found that the physical difference between kind of pushing a baby along in a pram and carrying a baby around and then sit down, get my laptop out, write, that physical difference was really refreshing. And I think it's really important that you don't spend all your time in the same position. Things like that just give you a nice break.
How did lying on the sofa with a laptop work while you were pregnant?
It was a challenge. I had to build up some pillows around it because the laptop got really hot on the bump. So you had to make sure you didn't overheat. And then later on, once I've had the baby, I kind of used another kind of collection of cushions to sort of balance the baby on my shoulder or wherever, so I could carry on typing at the same time. And then when they got a bit bigger, they started joining in on the typing, and the book suddenly got a lot more literary when you have a baby. A baby contributing. So then I just write in nap times. But again, it's that kind of physical difference and that kind of difference in motion and position that I found really helpful.
But it's doing it with other people. I think it's the social aspect of it as well.
Important.
So, I mean, I can no longer sing, but I would join a choir if I could. Because, again, I was in school choirs and I just love that thing where, a collection of voices, harmonies and stuff. I've always been a sucker for harmony, but especially vocal harmony. But yeah, doing it, making music with other people, I think is my proper pleasure. But even just noodling around on your own is very satisfying. And I broke my wrist 2011, I think I broke my wrist, and the orthopedic surgeon said, you'll never get full motion back in that wrist and you'll get arthritis in it as well. Ha ha ha. There was one of those
supportive,
one of those special surgeons. And because I play the drums, I do have full range of motion in my left wrist, which I shouldn't have, apparently. But I'm convinced it's drumming that's done it. So again, it's good physical exercise as well.
Yes. And I think you make an important point about doing something with other people, because writing can be it's quite a lonely thing. You're sitting there writing, which I enjoy a lot of that. I like not having to be around people all the time. But it's nice to have a social aspect to it as well. So I started writing my first books as part of a writing group. So we'd write and then we'd come together every 6 weeks or something. We'd share what we wrote, we'd get feedback, and then we'd kind of go back to it on our own.
I mean, again, that's one of those things that I'd have to rely on other people to recommend. I can't think of anything that I would hate more than trying to share a work in progress with strangers. Even if they were strangers who had become great friends, I just couldn't do it.
it has to be perfectly run. So I'm very lucky that the person who runs my writing group, who might come on the podcast one day, Philippa
Excellent.
Pride, she's Stephen King's UK editor, and
Right.
she creates this amazing safe space where you feel you can share what you've written, because it sounded terrible to me as well at the beginning. But actually, I love it, and I find it really motivating, and it gives me deadlines, and it makes it social in a way that writing isn't always. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what's coming up next? You've just published Lady Hardcastle book 13.
It's officially it's book 12 because the Christmas story is,
yes.
The Christmas story from 2017 is a short.
So what's next?
I'm working on the 13th one. I'm due to submit that by the end of this month for publication next May.
Sneak peek.
I haven't done a country house since book 3 in 2017. And so I wanted to do a country house, but I'd been to Holy Island last year. So we'd been to Holy Island and we'd been to Lindisfarne Castle. So you can only get to Holy Island at low tide. So you've got 2 opportunities a day to get onto the island. And Lindisfarne Castle was built reign of Henry VIII as a protection against the Scots and fell into disuse, blah, blah, blah. It was bought by the editor of Country Life magazine sometime in the early 1900s. And with Ned Lutyens as the architect, he turned it into a country retreat and it became his country house. And he would take his friends there. And there was one guy, Lytton Strachey, I think, who mostly just complained about how awful it was to get to, which I thought was hilarious. And they just drank and stuff. And there was a famous cellist of the time that used to go there as well. And I just loved the idea of this converted fort that was now a country house where everybody lived, where they just went for their country weekends. So I wanted to do something like that. So I moved the fort to the Devonshire coast. I removed the causeway so that you could only get there by boat, so that I could strand them there. And they're stuck in this fort, and there's a murder and thefts and stuff. And it's a real challenge, because my usual thing is loads of characters and loads of people. And if I get the feeling that the story is getting a bit flat, I would just take everybody off and they'll just go and do something else for a chapter, and they'll chat and they'll have fun. But I can't do that here, because there's a limited cast of characters. There's a limited number of rooms where they can be. And it's just one of those claustrophobic country house murders, but which also has a locked room element in it, because at the moment, it's not entirely clear how the murder could possibly have been committed. So yes, I'm really quite excited by this one, just because it's a challenge to write something slightly different. Same characters, same central characters and same relationship and the same bickering and comedy remarks between them, but this new setting on this island.
I think that's really interesting, and I agree that when you're a few books in, I've only got 3, but when you're a few books in, you start to want to think, how can I keep it fresh? How can I keep it different? How can I not write exactly the same book over and over again? And so with my 4th book, I'm bringing in an element of magic. So I'm still about halfway through, but it's still the kind of uplifting, character-driven book with a little bit of mystery. But I've got a little
real magic or imagined magic.
Real magic.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not a metaphor, it's some real magic in there. So I'm excited to just write something different. It feels like a new challenge how that works. So busy with that at the moment.
Fantastic. Because I did some spiritualism ghost stuff in the 2nd book, but only so that they could debunk it. It wasn't real. But that sounds brilliant. I occasionally say to my editor, how do you feel about science fiction? She said, absolutely hate it. Don't do that. So, we're not going to have any time travel. That would be a laugh, wouldn't it? Have your historical characters time traveling? Oh,
that would be amazing. Maybe a special one time. Special short story where they travel through time.
Self-published special. Yeah, that would be great.
Yes. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Tim. And thank you to everyone for listening. Tim's latest book, The Beast of Littleton Woods, is available now on Amazon. So I hope you've enjoyed Ray of Light. If you have, please do subscribe for more. You can find me at Eleanor Ray Books across Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And please do reach out to me there to let me know your thoughts. I'd really love to hear from you. And if you like what you've heard today, then perhaps you might like what I write too. It's uplifting book club fiction. My newest book is called See the Stars, about a woman who finds solace in the stars when her life doesn't go to plan. So see you next time for more tips on writing, reading, and happiness.